Why do you love movies?
I remember being 5 years old and walking into the Flick Theater, which was the local theater in our community in Detroit. Actually, we didn't have one in Southwest Detroit. We had to go to River Rouge and Ecorse to get to, and Wyandotte. It was like that little corner of Detroit that used to be Italian Polish and it somehow never got a movie theater, but just across the border in the next two cities, which remained all white up until, I think they mostly are still, had the movie theaters. So anyway, but the Flick was the one that was an Ecorse, but we could go to. It was walkable distance. And I went with my parents, and I remember holding my father's hand and saying, it was Prince Valiant, and the movie had just started. So there were giant horses. And because my family would retell the story too, and I remember it exactly, standing there going, "Look, it's a giant TV!" But I remember also that color, because I think all we had was black and white TV. I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just had a black and white TV. And so this giant, the horses, the color of the horses, you could see the horses' muscles and their skin, and the blue of Prince Valiant's tunic was like magic to me. And I was just in it and of it. And it was the one form of entertainment that we could do on Sunday that my parents would allow us to do. Give us a nickel each, and we'd go to the movies.
So interesting. So it was a transporting, I can just see the little Elise Bryant, with a little nickel in your little paw, going to the movies.
Yep. And we went by ourselves. This is back in the day when children could walk the streets by themselves. We would walk basically, I think, from your house to downtown Tacoma Park.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by ourselves.
And how old were you?
5, 6, 7, 8, up until we were teenagers.
Wow. So just here's a nickel, at least go to the movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't drop us off. They wouldn't.
You walk your own damn self. I ain't got time for that.
Like, I'm driving my son and my daughter to school. Like, really?
I know, right?
School? It's like right down there. And then when it was too far to walk, we got on the bus.
So do you remember, were there any particular movies that you liked, or was it just whatever was there? You just...
Oh, yeah. Prince Valiant, The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was like the first scary movie I saw.
I actually have seen that since, and it's cheesy, but it's still scary.
Yeah, I bet. But that when that creature hand comes up out of the water and yeah. But we didn't see. I absolutely love The King and I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know, at least I've identified this, was that there were so few people of color in films. So it was like Yul Brynner was it, and he was really, what is he? Like Serbian, Croatian or something.
I actually we would go to visit my grandparents in New York City once a year, and they would do stuff like take us to the theater, which was wasted. I was like that same thing. I was like 5 or 6. But I do remember, we saw The King and I with Yul Brynner. Now we were up in I know, we were up in the balcony, but even then I could see this was a cool thing.
Oh my God.
I don't remember the acting. I just remember the music.
Yeah. Oh no, the music is powerful. Hi, Danny. How are you?
Danny Schur. He's live. Danny, good to see you, brother. Thanks. It's early where you are, right?
Not too bad. 8-ish.
Okay. Why do you love movies? What's your movie's origin story?
Wow, man, this is a classic. So, I guess it was 1977, and remember, I'm in Winnipeg, Canada, and I grew up 200 miles north of here, a wee little town called Ethelbert. It never had more than like 1,000 people, and there's maybe 200 there now. But it had the most incredible movie theater. The biggest building where people could gather was the movie theater. Like it had to sit, I'm sure you could put half the town at that time in the theater. It was big. It was really big. And it was run by really good friends of our family. I went to school with Bev. Her family owned the theater. Remember, Bev would be shoveling popcorn. And this was the day, we're talking, its heyday was before VHS. And every show on the weekend, including 2 o'clock on a Saturday. Remember, this is a farming community. the place is packed. Bev and her dad were just like shoveling the popcorn. And I saw a lot of movies there. And small towns weren't as dead as they are now. And it was the place to be. Like, you may as well have been in Hollywood or New York. Like, it was awesome. And I remember them having first run movies, not months after, but like then, but as much as the big centers. So here's my story about that night in probably June 1977. Star Wars.
Oh my God! Yes.
And it was so huge, even in that small farming community. Get this, for the afternoon, school was off. The whole school trounced over to Bev's movie theater, like the whole school, and we watched it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday or whatever it was. I think it was a Friday. And remember sci-fi movies before that where you just kind of knew, even as a kid, it wasn't quite real or whatever. This felt so real.
Yeah.
And I guess I was responding to the cool tech of the way they made the ships, whatever. Oh my God, I was lock, stock, and barrel. So get this. Then I said to my parents, I got to go again. And they were like, we can't take it. I said, just dump me off at night. So I went to this 6 o'clock show.
With the same day?
Same day.
Oh my.
And then it let out my brothers to pick me up. And here's where it gets really interesting. It was getting stormy, like super duper prairie tornado stormy.
Yeah.
And I said, just go home, come back. I want to see the third show.
Danny had gone down to Star Wars rabbit holes.
And then get this, there was actually a tornado about a mile away from town. That's how stormy it was. I didn't know anything. I was in Star Wars land.
Oh my God, that's a great.
The weird thing is, I'm not the biggest, like, I'm not a Star Wars freak. Some people are. It's that first movie that does it.
First one.
Call it the fourth, whatever. There's just something magical about that.
It's a funny thing. I remember this. I actually saw that because it came out in the summer. I was working at summer camp that year, 77. And I didn't know anything about it. Plus, it's up in the Adirondacks and there's of course, no internet. And there was the one theater in town. In fact, it's interesting. The theater was one of those sort of hangar things that they had built back during, I think beforehand, it had been something for the military. It was one of those round kind of things, very large, but very basic. But in summer camp on a Saturday night, you didn't even ask what the movie was. You just went. It was just a big moose up in the Adirondacks, and you just went. And we were in the parking lot beforehand. Somebody had gotten hold of some Ripple, as I recall.
Yes.
So I'm 17. I don't know anything about drinking. So we go in there, and I'm that first thing that starts with the stuff coming, with the big titles coming at you, and then the shit coming at you. And I'm like, I was just like, I was like right down there. And Elise, by the way, and you wouldn't know this, but Elise is you're more of a Trekkie, not so much with the Star Wars. But you're okay with Star Wars too, right?
Yes. I had to, because it was, and I still do this. If it's a popular film, I will go see it, even if it's not my genre, even if I don't care. And I had to see Star Wars because everybody was talking about it. So I went to see it.
Yeah. So and we will get to Stand at some point, but what are some of your other favorite movies, Danny? Things that you go back to again and again?
Of course, it's musicals. Like soon after Star Wars, it was Fiddler on the Roof. That was my first purchase on iTunes of a movie in the cloud, so you could just watch it all the time. And as much as it's derided, whenever I saw it at that age for the first time, Sound of Music, I was just like so sold on it. And I, even at that age, got that, now don't laugh when you hear me say this, that Sound of Music had a bit of a subversive edge.
All right, let me stop there because the actor who was in Sound of Music just so help me because I've seen it like I'm not even sure I've ever seen the whole movie. I've seen bits and pieces. I don't get that movie. I don't get why it's popular. It's also about the whitest movie I've ever seen. And at least you can jump into it, but help me to understand why is this movie so damn popular?
It's the songs.
Okay.
I mean, it's good songs.
Is that a roll eye or is that a thinking eye?
That was a thinking eye. Because really, I was, yeah, it's one of the, I know how popular it is. I've actually never seen it.
Whoa, the secrets that come out in this show.
I should because of its popularity. And I know the songs. The songs are very popular and all that. But yeah, it's really.
It's a couple of things. Like, I mean, Julie Andrews does a really good job in a kind of thankless role. Christopher Plummer, as much as there's this like lore about how much he hated it, he called it the sound of phlegm, blah, blah, blah.
I didn't know that.
Believe it or not, here's what I just read recently. As saccharine as it is, compared to the real story, he actually brought an edge to it because all the other potential candidates, all the people who had played the role before were just ineffectual. So he was credible and he walked back his objections to it. But here's what's subversive about it. It really is about this family doing a very dangerous underground kind of thing. And although it's really whitewashed in the movie, for its time, it still does a good job. The songs hold up. So, of course, it's going to be popular. I like the Les Mis movie. I didn't think it was perfect. There's certain, the recent one,
yeah,
certain actors who shall remain nameless that aren't great singers, but it doesn't matter.
Cinematically, that I found fascinating.
Sure.
Tell me more. Tell me what.
Again, I've never done analysis on it. I really thought about it, but it captured me. The images, the power of the images, the coloring of the film was.
It's very beautiful.
And
poverty porn.
Was that?
Some people call it poverty porn. Like it makes much of the sort of Dickensian just the poverty, but it's still probably pretty accurate. There's some just great performances. Anne Hathaway has been derided for other roles. You can't for what she does in that movie. Like she just leaves it all out there.
She does. I wouldn't give her anything before that. And it really didn't make me go see the other ones after that. But in that moment, I thought, oh no, she's got this. She is really flowing real in her grief.
And she's a killer singer. To be able to act and sing is a tough thing.
At the same time, yeah. Very few people can do that. And it's really hard.
But one of the things I was actually thinking, and this will take us to Stand a little bit, and maybe it's just me because I just notice weird things, but I thought that all the characters, and it was their clothes were not, for the time, should have been a lot dirtier.
You're talking about Stand?
I am talking about Stand.
Okay, so we had major debates around the table.
Tell us, because
there's the poverty porn Les Mis school, which is take the clothes, put them in a puddle of mud, walk on them, don't wash them, then have the characters put them on.
I'm in that school.
And then the other school is, and this is born by some research, and in the end, I'll tell you the very simple thing that happened, which just made us go this way. Poor people owned very little wardrobe. They may use the same outfit to go to church and to go to work. If you're a telephone operator, you had one good dress. Mm-hmm. You made sure that white shirt that went beneath your sort of pinafore dress was washed and starched. So poor people weren't slobs if they owned a small wardrobe. So there's a lot of pictures and a lot of research that says, where does this come from of the like rags? Like there's rags, but your average lower class worker still kept 2 or 3 things in really nice shape. Your Sunday best, of course, was always, and your work thing. If you were an office worker, even if you were like a seamstress or something, you put your hair up nicely in a Gibson girl thing in the era of stand. There's that school. And that the truly trashy clothing, that was just if you worked in like a factory or a farm. But you're otherwise, you took care of your stuff. But for low budget movies where you rent the costumes, not make them, they don't really like you trashing them all to hell. So that's the honest to God truth.
That
And if
makes
you
sense.
talk to a rental house about stuff, they will always be proponents of the latter theory.
Okay, I'm fine. And so you may or may not know Elise has been involved in how many labor operas, jazz operas now? 2, 3, 4? I've lost track.
Two jazz operas and 2 musicals.
So she was about making these kinds of decisions, and that was just having done a little bit of work and I was peripherally involved. It seems like there's so many of those kinds of quote unquote small, but actually big decisions that you have to make that are not just artistic decisions, but
Practically.
like in the end, you're renting the costumes and they're not going to want them back all trash. Elise is smiling. You get that, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I remember looking out the window of the production facility that we were renting for our offices and looking out into a gravel parking lot with puddles, and out walked one of our costume assistants and just chucked him in the puddle, and she was walking over them. And I thought, that's not the rental stock.
Uh-huh.
I can also tell in the movie there were the background performers that we ensured had the very most correct period stuff versus volunteers that showed them up in mass for some of the big scenes. There's that difference too. Going back to influential shows, I will say that Newsies doesn't do it for me. And we actively sought to go in a different direction. I'm not a lover of the dance musicals personally. There's a few dance musicals that are dance musicals, but I hate it when there's that Neverland of a musical with lots of dance. That's why I like Les Mis, I like Fiddler. No dance other than when it's for an event like the wedding in Fiddler.
So is it the unnaturalness? What is it that doesn't work for you?
It's like dog and cat people. There are people that like musicals, but then it divides into, do you like dance musicals versus non-dance musicals? I just don't like dance musicals. It's just too, it's unrealistic as it is. So dance just takes it further. But when the dance is so atypical for the milieu, come on, Newsies dancing? Yes. That's the line I can't cross.
You don't think the little urchins were dancing in the streets of New York, really?
No. And then that usually breeds an unrealistic feel through the other stuff. So Newsies has just never done it for me. God bless Disney for doing a labor musical. I still can't believe that happened. But so we actively sought not to be like Newsies. So we are either criticized or lauded for our ultra realism. And some people say it's so dark, it's so whatever. That's what we were going for.
I'm just curious. I'm just hung up a little bit though. So because I don't know that I fall easily into any of those schools, because I mean, it's just movie by movie for me. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But for me, I don't, the breaking into song is unnatural, unless you're Elise Bryant, who breaks into song. She may break into song at any moment here, but unless you're hanging around with Elise or somebody else who's really into theater who does start singing, that doesn't happen. And so so if you got a movie like Stand where people do break into song, I'm like, if they can break into song, why couldn't they break into? I'm not saying that.
No, absolutely.
I have a theory.
Okay, lay it on us.
I didn't see Newsies. As a film, but I did go to the theater production.
Yeah.
And
totally different though.
Totally different, right? Totally different. And this whole idea of breaking out and dance. And the one thing I liked about this production that they did at Arena Stage is that it wasn't all pelvic thrust, because now theater choreographies, all the pelvic thrusts. Everybody's got to do at least 12 pelvic thrusts in any dance number. And I'm
It's
just
in
like,
the union contract, Elise. It's actually.
it's got to be. But here's the deal: is that, and this is about breaking out in song, is that people do sing. It's part of the way that we process as human beings in multiple ways. And in European culture, as well as African culture and South American culture, it was a part of people's daily lives. In work, people would sing. And somehow singing got separated from that to performance. And this is the whole classical music thing, yada, yada, it's all written out on paper. No. So I go to South Africa, right? This is 1994, 95, something like that. No, it's 2000. Let me fast forward.
We'll have our research department check and see when she actually went.
So we're on this tour to plants. We go to a steel mill, and it's 4 or 5 of us from the States, and then a South African trade union activists from various occupations. And so for some of them, it was the first time being in a steel mill. And I had been in the River Rouge plant because I grew up in Detroit, and that's where my father worked. But literally these great giant buckets of steel were pointing. People were like, oh my God. We go outside, and there's this guy pulling these slabs of steel. He's out there by himself in the heat, pulling these slabs of steel off into the ground, and they start singing. The people on our tour start singing.
Wow.
And I said, okay, I get goosebumps. I said to them, what are you singing about? I said, oh, we're singing that the work is nasty and the pay is low, that kind of thing. I was like, okay. They sang at every coffee break.
Wow.
They would break in a song. I would say to them, okay, so how do you know what part to sing? How do you know like what part to go? Like, how do you know if it's alto, tenor? They're like, Rick, what you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. They didn't know what I was talking about. It's like, you just sing wherever you are. I realized in that moment that I was not born in Africa, but Africa was born in me. Mm. And that I can honor that sometimes you just sing because the hurt is so great, because the grief is so strong, because the joy is so good. So I literally opened up the door a couple mornings ago and went, oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, nobody's here. Nobody's listening. It's just me. And so I think that is a legitimate expression that became commercialized in the theater industry, which was cranking out stuff to keep people pacified and keep people happy. And then same thing in the movie industry. So to see a film like Stan, and even the Newsies, I mean, that Disney did a unionized oriented film is remarkable. Yeah, you can appreciate it. And we need more of it. And people love it.
They do.
So Chris, here's what a director said to me about the internal justification that actors need to know about going into song. And this is in no way related to what you just said, because yeah, there's tons of cultures that sing all the time. It seems that the sort of white Anglo culture might be one of the only ones that doesn't. But that director, Winnipeg director Anne Hodges, she said something that I'll never forget. She said, as an actor, all you got to know is there's dialogue and then there's song. If a song is well earned, it's just dialogue that's gone to the next level of.
Sure, I'll buy that.
And I'm sure dancers say the same.
And that leads to another question actually back for you, Danny, which is thinking, like I was imagining a little Elise with a nickel in her hand going down to the theater. So now I've got this little picture of Danny Schur in this little farming town going to, the theater and seeing God knows what. A whole wide world is being brought into your little town. And so that must have been in a large part made you who you are today. And I'm also wondering, so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, but also wondering about where your music comes from, because that's a huge part, obviously, of who you are.
So music, that's simple. That's church, like with many cultures. So I remember being small. One of my first memories, I was like 2.5 or 3 and get this memory. So I'm on my back on the floor, shimmying on my back under the benches of the church. So I'm going like far. I'm going yards this way and that way. And as I shimmy, I'm looking up old ladies' skirts. It was just like something else. And there's me, and my mom didn't notice. But during that whole time, I remember being on my back and just so comforted by the sound of the choral music. You talk about like, how do they know if they take alto or soprano or whatever? I have to say, in that little town of Ethelbert, Father Kamenatsky, like right from Ukraine, full on really choral traditional guy. the Ukrainian vocal tradition is super duper choral from way back. So that choir was good. I heard the most basso profundo, that's the term for the lowest of the basses. My math teacher, Miroslav Pelachati, they called him Shorty because he was like 5'2". Honest to God, this guy hit notes that just made you go, and there are some songs, and I have to say, the Ukrainian, both the mass, as in during divine liturgy stuff, and some of the like the hit parade of the old tunes, they are super catchy. Like they are, you hear it one time and you're singing that song forever, mostly very minor key stuff. So I learned about songwriting on my back in the floor of the church from the time I was 3. There's one song, I will send you MP3 of it, Chris, so you two can both hear it. So the Ukrainian word is Vichnaya Pamyat. Vichnaya meaning forever, Pamyat memory. So loosely translated as their memory will be eternal. That is the funeral song. You're going to be a bawling wreck because it's a catchy tune, super sad. Like it just makes you cry buckets. And I was an altar boy from the time I was 6 to 16. Try being an altar boy at a funeral where you have to have a certain sense of decorum. Vichnaya Pamyat starts, and I'm just no decorum whatsoever. So I learned the power of music in church. Then my mom was choir director. I was the accompanist there. So I got like right inside those songs. Not only could I hear how good they are, I could see the manuscript and go, oh, that's how that song was built. So all of my songwriting craft, I learned by 8 or 10 from that stuff. Oh, and then my sister had Elvis compilation albums. Then I was done.
So the Ukrainian meets the Elvis, and then we're onto Danny Schur. So here's another thing that I was thinking, as going off of a thought from Elise from earlier about that. And actually, what you're talking about too, which is a lot of this culture. You go back before recording, right? So the culture was you've got your fiddle, you've got your church song. This is something that we created ourselves because we didn't have recording. So ever since you were able to start recording stuff, then you're getting more and more into the performances, and you get to Hollywood and all of that sort of control. But now that script has been flipped because everybody with an iPhone can TikTok videos a natural or unnatural outgrowth of that. But I'm just wondering, from a labor perspective, from a worker's perspective, I think there's a good argument that the means of production has been put back in our hands. And I'd love for both of you to react to that.
Go ahead, Elise.
So I was gonna say, go, Danny.
I'm a firm believer that every local should own the camera that I have. I'm looking at the Blackmagic 6K. It is $2,000.
Is that something you can grab and show us?
Yeah.
Blackmagic 6K.
I want to see this thing. Elise is putting it on her shopping list here.
I am. I got poverty porn down here too. I'm looking that up. I'm gonna.
That's not what you think it is, okay?
Really?
Okay, so I have to take it off of the.
Look at this thing. Look at this. Is not. See, this is not nearly what I thought it was. I thought it was going to be like, wow.
No, this is. I've got a monitor on the top. See that? Which can flip this way or that way, whether you're doing selfies or otherwise. You just need one lens these days. In the old days, you'd need $5,000 of lenses. Now, one of the best lenses in the world is a telephoto. It used to be the telephoto was not the way to go. 18 to 35. So without repositioning the camera, you can go close or far. It shoots 6K. In the movie theater, the highest quality you'll ever watch is only 2K HD.
So you're talking about resolution, right?
Yeah. So you shoot in HD, which is 6,000 pixels wide. What that allows you to do is shoot super duper wide. And in post, you can say, I want to take that third of the frame and you could still get 2K out of 1/3 of the frame. They now have 12K, which is just silly because you can only basically see 4K on any TV. So it's future proof is what I'm getting at. This is 2,000 American dollars.
Wow.
So I swear to God, every local should make this their hardware purchase. This has democratized the whole industry to the extent that you could shoot a feature. You can shoot shorts. If you want to do documentary shorts, if you want to shoot your theater production, you would not believe how good stuff looks in this. There's a whole subculture on YouTube about my favorite Blackmagic 6K camera settings, blah, blah, blah. You would not believe how good it looks. So yeah, it's the last 10 years, but specifically the last 2. Actually, 2020 was amazing for the advent of these cameras. You can use an iPhone 12. It's way overpriced for what you get for video. It's good, but it's not as good as one of these. That's my little spiel. I'm not being paid by Blackmagic. I just love them.
Yeah, get a little endorsement there. But actually, it's a good point because an iPhone 12 is going to cost almost as much as that camera.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like the camera is just much better. But I guess one of the things that it points up is that so the technology, and I'm assuming that there's much more accessible. Like I've been doing a lot of audio stuff, right? And any audio people will tell you, you need to use this program or that program. Most of us are just using Audacity. It's a free program. It gets the job done. I'm assuming there's some equivalent for video editing.
This comes with DaVinci Resolve for free.
Oh, okay.
These folks are super disruptive. They're like, we want to put it in the hands of the people. The CEO is this Australian disruptor dude. He's at Elon Musk of cameras. Grant, I forgot his last name. And he really believes that just give people the tools. So they give you the incredibly powerful editing program for free when you buy this.
Wow.
And I assume it's something because the thing that I've noticed is that when you get some of these programs that are incredibly powerful, the learning curve to sit, and Elise knows what I'm talking about. And that's one of the reasons that Audacity, by the way, is so popular, not only because it's free, but because it's easy to use. You can figure it out in 10 minutes. And some of these other ones that are much more powerful are not only expensive, but the learning curve is just horrendous. And so I'm assuming
with video, even the most deceptively easy looking program like DaVinci, even like Final Cut, there are layers in it where once you go down the rabbit hole, you can get as in-depth as you want to, but they're generally really easy user interfaces.
I got a question.
Yep.
So did you do theater or did you go directly to film?
I'm bi.
he goes both ways.
I started in theater. All of my musicals I've written for start on stage. And boy, oh boy, we could have just one session about the difference between live and film. And where my heart is when I say there's no substitute for live. It's not only is it, okay, I can get into the theory about the way our brains evolved. There's lots of research about this. But as good as it is speaking to you on a screen, it does not fire the same synapses as when a human is beside you. So forever, a movie musical is going to be a different experience at a brain level. When we're watching a live theatrical musical, it's like we're talking to someone. That's the part of the brain that fires. So live theater is best. I know that's a commercialized saying, but it really is true. So here's a guy, I can tell you this. I've made my stage musical into a movie. And I love the movie, don't get me wrong. I know what it could have been if we had millions and millions more. I know what it could have been if we could have included the 6 songs that got cut, because you can't have a 3-hour-long movie.
No.
But I'll tell you right now, in June of 2019, to the day, the 100th anniversary of the events on which the musical is based, the day, 100 years later, anniversary of Bloody Saturday, to see 2,000 people watching the stage version of this, that will go down for me in my life as the greatest event artistically in my life. There's just nothing like live theater. Holy man.
So that's what brought me to the question. What behind that question was acting in film. It's not the same thing as acting on stage.
No.
And I know Greg Henry. I
Oh.
met Henry when he was a student at the University of Michigan. Yeah, so I was like, oh my God, it's Greg Henry. I can't stand it. I'm so looking forward to it. And I thought, okay, I think of Greg as a stage as opposed to theater. And
That's
I just
true,
wondered
eh? Yeah.
yeah. And I know he's done film, but I just wondered in terms of the other actors, were they stage or were they theater? Were they theater or were they film?
Here, there's so much stage going on. We have a super well-known, Canada's longest lasting outdoor musical theater stage called Rainbow Stage. So most actors are doing Rainbow Stage in the summer and doing movies otherwise.
Gotcha.
So
okay. Yeah.
they're doing both here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it's like never the two shall meet. It's like I'm theater or I'm film. You certainly can see when a theater actor doesn't have much experience with film because they're just overdoing it like hell. And there's a few instances in Stand, and critics will say, well, I was a theater actor going way too far. I don't give a rat's. Yeah, I now can see the difference. Whereas 10 years ago, when I didn't know so much about, or know the little I know about directing, I couldn't tell the difference between a theatrical flourish and a filmic one. It's just such a different thing when the camera is this far away from you in 6K, how little you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I was thinking about, I've been watching these bunch of Australian TV things, and one of the things I love about them is that they always have a making of, which I don't think our shows do, or if they do, I've never seen them. And it's fascinating, and you both have a much better feel for this than I do, but when they do the making of, what I'm looking at, there'll be some intimate scene of two people having a coffee. There's like 30 people. It's amazing. How many, there's a person told them that the lights and that this and I don't know what half the other people are doing, to be honest, but it's just, and I was just thinking about, because when you're watching it, you're just seeing these two people in this intimate scene. What's it like to be actually in the middle, because the scene doesn't take very long. They do a little shooting and then they break and then they're having the coffee and they're talking. And I was just amazed. And again, from a work perspective, I was like, that's a lot of people. And I was thinking about all the people that are either not working right now or going back to work under pandemic conditions. And people have no idea how many folks are involved. And it's the same thing in theater. I know just from working with you, Elise, how many people were behind the scenes. And that was not a huge production.
I learned this principle in the following way. I was scouting locations in advance of our having a locations manager, and I had all these ideas about where we should shoot.
You have cards for all these different jobs you've done.
Yeah. And so then we bring the director from Hollywood, show him some of the spaces which were on location spaces, and he'd say, but where's the crew gonna go? I completely forgot about that. That's why in studio shooting is so preferred, because you just, it's not too expensive to build a little set, but then have the space for 40 people behind the camera.
Right.
Yeah, just amazing. And it was, and I knew that because in our film festival, we always roll all the credits. We never bring up the lights. And I always have to tell people ahead of time, because they're so used to that's what's happened, especially if you have some talent who's going to do a Q&A afterwards, and they'll bring up, and I'm like, not in this festival. We are going to roll all the credits because these are all the people that make the movie. And so a lot of people they just don't know, because they don't watch the credits. And it's so many, it's just thousands and thousands of folks. And that's whether it's production, pre-production, post-production, it's a lot of people.
Yep. That's why God invented labor tax credits. Because really, if you employ humans and generate a whole bunch of income tax, the best way for governments to support filmmaking is to give some of that income tax back to help fund the film. There are very few jurisdictions that don't have film labor tax credits, and places like Atlanta have just absolutely blossomed as film production centers. Atlanta is arguably a more important film production location than Hollywood. I think anyone would support me on that.
Because
Whenever I talk to someone in Hollywood, they're like,
Very-
oh yeah, we're shooting in Atlanta. We're this in Atlanta. My producer's from Atlanta, blah, 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 blah.
Yep. Yeah.
interesting. So last question before we wrap up, what, just as somebody who has gone back and forth between the two worlds, what's important about labor film, about film for labor audiences, folks either watching or thinking about making? What's the importance?
Ernest Hemingway said, right about what, in the case of the Winnipeg General Strike and this movie and the stage show on which it's based, what makes me most proud, because we came from a place where 25 years ago, when it was the 75th anniversary of the Winnipeg General Strike, the big museum here had a failed exhibit for the 75th anniversary because the legacy of the strike had been so divisive that 75 years later, nobody came to the show. I always say that the legacy of the general strike was either the cure for baldness or the cause. And at that time, it was definitely the cause. So I took an approach which was not the traditional labor history approach, because there are, I bet you there's 4 dozen books that are very academic about the, I'll call it dry labor history aspects of the strike. There's minutia about what was being negotiated, et cetera, and it's just so damn dry. So my approach was, how about tell the story from a community that wasn't really represented, and never mind not represented. The guy who died, Mike Sokolowski of the Ukrainian Canadian community, there was nothing. There's no monuments, no nothing, because the shame was so great. They put him in the ground. He had a little piece of concrete with the number 483 in it. No headstone, no nothing. Through my research, it just so happened that I got to lead the charge to get him a headstone. So the point was, tell the story from the perspective that hadn't been told before. Make it part of the whole story. Of course, it's a story about a general strike and labor history, but work in the immigrant angle, and by immigrant, Eastern European angle. With the movie, work in the Black community who would come from Oklahoma here, the indigenous stories of the First World War. So you tell a story from a formerly unrepresented parts of the storytelling. So in 2019, 100 years later, to have seen that full theater in the fall, to have had the #1 Canadian movie from it, that's the most gratifying artistic thing I ever did. So the lesson is, this is where I'm getting back to Hemingway.
Bringing it home. He's bringing it home.
Take that story from your local area and make it universal, because they all are. The most gratifying thing I heard was in Washington, a few blocks away from where you are, Chris. We were in the NEA building doing an early screening. It was so early, we hadn't even finished colorizing the film. It looked atrocious. But a woman came up to me from, where the heck was it? Her accent, I can't remember, but all I knew was this was not her story. She came from somewhere where this was not her story. And she said, "My God, your story is our story. God bless you for it." And I just went, "Ah!" So that made me feel like my work as an artist was done. So find your story that no one else will have told, because the outside world doesn't care about that story. No one gives a rat's ass about the Winnipeg General Strike, but you can find the universal in that story that's probably forgotten right under your nose.
And Danny, that was one of the things I remember. I'd seen, he showed it, to us before it was released. And I remember when we were looking, even recently when we were looking to screen it, and I've been doing the film festivals here and then up in Rochester for 30 years. And I always have to think about how am I going to pitch this to my audience? And some films are fairly easy. And I was like, it's about a Canadian, people don't even know where Winnipeg is. It's 100 years old, about a general strike nobody's ever heard of. And I just thought, this is going to be, and by the way, it's a musical, right? Yeah. Which I know I've got Elise, right? I've got my little crowd of folks who will show up for musicals. But I remember thinking, this has got, normally you've got one or two things going for you. Everything that was going for me is, but in the end, I think it's been our biggest crowd since. And so I think that there's something about movies, and it's one of the reasons that we wanted to do this podcast, is that somehow you can, these stories, and at least I was thinking about the jazz operas that you and Steve have done, which are similar things that people did not know about outside those communities. And then you did the same thing that Danny did. You found these people and these pieces of that story that even probably people who were aware didn't know about. And that something about a movie gives us access to it. It's a very interesting phenomenon. So I'm gonna leave a last word to my sister here, Elise.
I think that you basically said it, and Danny said it earlier. It gives people more access to storytelling, and that's the essence of film and theater. And even in our religious organizations, it's storytelling. History is weaving the web, and so that's what you did with Stand, and you brought forth those voices of those people who would never be heard otherwise, to a much larger audience. And that's democracy.